Welcome to the Bojack podcast. Horseman, obviously. This is episode number 1. My name is Dominic and I'm joined by Matthew.
Hello.
The purpose of this podcast is for me to convince Matthew that Bojack Horseman is the greatest animated TV show of all time. That's quite a reach, isn't it?
That is, yeah.
But that's what we're going to try and do over this podcast.
Yeah, good luck.
In this episode, we're going to be discussing Series 1, Episode 1, Bojack Horseman, the Bojack Horseman Story, Chapter 1. Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. First ever podcast, so...
Yeah, my first podcast as well.
Pop in my podcast cherry.
Yes, I think it should be quite interesting doing a podcast, because it seems we've never done it before. I mean, I've not looked into it much at all, and I don't know if you have, but this is going to be a very, very basic podcast.
Well, I mean, it is 2024. Are we real, actual functioning humans if we
don't have a podcast?
Yeah, we don't have a podcast.
Matthew, you've not seen any of them, have you? Apart from the first 2 now.
I watched some when it started, 2014 maybe, and I definitely watched at least the first episode, or maybe the first 2 or 3 episodes, but I don't really remember much about them. So
good. That's good.
I'm still going into them forever.
Yeah. One of the ideas around this podcast was, for me, someone that's watched Bojack a huge amount of times, I really like the idea of discussing it with someone that's never seen it before and sort of reliving that journey.
Okay.
Of, right, this is a nice TV show, into seeing something that has... It's had a big effect on me.
Okay. Given that it did start like 10 years ago and you've watched it a lot, probably more than any other show, I know it's difficult to take yourself back to this beginning, but when you started watching it, did you enjoy it straight away? Did you watch?
Yes.
Like straight away you were hooked. You were like, I'm in, this is brilliant.
Yes, but it's also something where I feel like it's got better the more I've watched it.
You feel like it's got better as a series over time, or you feel like it's got better with repeat viewing?
No, with repeat viewing.
Okay.
I think one thing, well, to be fair, the answer's both. It's got better as you get to the end, at the end of Series 6. Okay. It gets amazing.
Okay.
But also, when you rewatch it, there's so much, there is different levels to watch it on. And I think the more you watch it, the more you see those different levels.
Okay.
And the more you see little jokes that you might not have seen before. So I think both. I think it gets better with time, and as you go through it, it gets a lot better. I suppose, you tell us what happens in this episode.
Okay, before we get onto the episode, I'll preface this whole podcast by saying, when I watched Bojack Horseman initially, I didn't really enjoy it. And I've expressed this to you before, and now hence why we're here and you're trying to convince me that it's good. And the consensus seems to be from the internet is that it is a good show. It has high ratings on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and whatever other aggregator you want to pay attention to. But I remember watching the first 2 or 3 episodes and just not really enjoying it at all. But this was at a time when I was also watching Archer, and I think I was looking for something like Archer because that was my benchmark for animated shows at that time, and Bojack fell well short of that for me. Now in 2024, the benchmark has changed, and now it's Rick and Morty. I think Rick and Morty's the smartest cartoon ever written. So going into this, my reference point will be Archer, Rick and Morty, and obviously South Park.
There's probably going to be people listening to this podcast that have watched it, and there is a strong consensus that it's a weak start.
Okay.
So, and that's why I'm hoping that at the very least, you will say, yes, do you know what? Actually, it's good.
Okay.
But my estimation is you will say, yes, it's great, and I would have succeeded if you go, that is my new favourite animated TV show.
Yeah.
I'm not putting it against other TV shows. That's too broad. I think.
No.
So that's what I'm thinking. You're definitely going to say it's good. Hopefully you'll say it's great. My aim is for you to say it's the best ever.
Okay. So episode 1.
Episode 1.
Yeah. Would you like me to tell you what happens in episode 1?
I would like to. And I am smiling here because I think it's probably without getting into my thoughts on the episode, I think it's a difficult episode to say what happens.
I think I don't know if this was the pilot, because sometimes with TV shows, the pilot and episode 1 are the same thing, and sometimes there's a pilot which then means a show gets greenlit. So I don't know if this is the pilot or there was a pilot previous to episode 1, but episode 1 is just 100% just setting the scene. It's telling you who Bojack is, his life now, as in he was a famous TV star in the 90s, and now he's a washed up, narcissistic, self-righteous horse living off the fantasies of his previous life. It also introduces the host of supporting characters. There's his girlfriend, who soon becomes ex-girlfriend, who then also turns out to be his agent. There is a housemate, quote-unquote housemate, a squatter, who's voiced by Aaron Paul, and he seems, I like Aaron Paul, even though in everything that he's in, I can't stop associating him with Jesse from Breaking Bad. In Bojack, his character, while isn't Jesse, it's that similar kind of slacker, like a bit of a waster kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's also Mr. Peanut Butter.
Yes.
Yeah. Who's basically kind of like the new Bojack. Like he's popular and successful, and he's got a show that seems to be exactly the same as what Bojack's show was. Am I missing any of the other main supporting characters introduced in episode 1?
I think there's Diane, that I'd also say, the ghostwriter.
Oh, she's introduced at the end. Who's also she's in a relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter at the time, in episode 1.
Yes.
I don't think, my total guess is that's not going to last. I think they are going to break up because Diane seems to be intelligent. I don't know. She seems to be, maybe on initial inspection, she seems to be maybe the smartest person,
right,
in the show.
No, I think that's fair.
The show also introduces us to a world where sentient talking animals are just a natural part of society.
Yes.
I don't know if this is addressed at any point in the future, or whether it's just an accepted thing, like The Simpsons. Everyone in The Simpsons is yellow. It's not something that needs to be addressed. It is just the way that the world is in The Simpsons. And then it sets up the overarching story, or whether that's the arc for season 1 or the arc for the whole 6 seasons together, is Bojack trying to write his memoirs so that he can try and become relevant again.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. I was going to save it for a point at the end, but watching this episode again and really critiquing it, there is not a strong story. Essentially what happens is we meet Bojack. He is trying to write a book, but he's failing to write a book. He's procrastinating, and he meets someone that is going to become his ghostwriter. Yeah, that's essentially. He's not. So there's a lot that gets introduced, but it's one of the weakest stories of.
Yeah, it's like I said, it just felt like it was literally just setting the scene. That's all it is. And I don't think it's impossible to set the scene and establish a good story. But in this case, I think they sacrifice story for world building. While we're discussing the characters, the one thing that I will say is I hate everyone in the show. There's no one in episode 1 that I liked.
Good.
They're all very unlikable in their own ways. Even the penguin guy who works at Penguin Book.
Yeah.
Right? Even he's like, he seems a bit like down on his luck. He reminded me of, is it Dale in The Simpsons?
Gil.
Gil, is it the guy that's like the car salesman guy? Yeah, okay.
Well, Gil,
Yeah, Gil, that's it. Yeah.
he really is.
Yeah, he reminds.
But then he's one of my favourite sort of sub characters of The Simpsons. So I think that's actually.
But it's like, he just seems really whiny and self-deprecating and just. I didn't even like him. He was funny.
Right.
He was an interesting because what I have noticed from both the first two episodes is the animal jokes thrown in there.
Right.
And I think the fact that Penguin Books being a very well-known publisher of books and having a literal penguin working for Penguin Books was a bit.
Do you think it's on the nose?
Too on the nose,
Right,
yeah, totally.
Okay. Just on a quick note, you obviously can't see us, but I am smiling intensely through everything Matthew says, just because so many of the points he's making that he thinks are negative points for me are such positive points, and I really like that it's having that effect on him. I'm going to go right back to the start of the episode, and we see Horsing Around, which is this show that Bojack was on in the 90s. It's a really interesting way, I think, to start the episode and to start the series. One, because it's showing us what his past is, but it felt like there was something very off about that scene. It felt like he'd written it so it reminded us of the comfort of a sitcom, but this scene that it created, it definitely felt off key. It didn't feel like a really comfortable sitcom.
I don't know if they mentioned it if he actually spoke about it in the show specifically. The show BoJack Horseman seems to highlight the fact that this show Horsing Around doesn't make any sense. There's a horse looking after a family of children.
Yes.
And I don't know I can't remember if he specifically addressed that or if it's just like a felt sense that I got.
I think this is I think this is really interesting though, because this is what a lot of I feel like a lot of sitcoms do have that quirk to them. Like Happy Days, where the Fonz wasn't the Fonz just. I mean, it's ages since I watched it, but I think he was literally just a random guy who was a friend.
What was your sitcom? Yeah, like you said, you got that comfort sitcom like that Horsing Around is supposed to remind you of. Like, what was yours?
I suppose I'd say The American Office now.
Well, when you were a kid? Not like...
Yeah, I didn't watch lots of sitcoms when I was a kid.
You didn't watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Yeah, but like not to the extent that we do now with on-demand stuff.
Okay.
Like it was just something...
I was meaning that like the Horsing Around sitcom, you said that it was like it was harkening back to that era of like cheesy American sitcom kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like for me, it was growing up. It was Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, 100%.
No, I think that was the one that that is a good example of one we would have watched.
I think there was a lot because I think this was much bigger in America. There was a lot that we weren't exposed to.
Yes, it was obviously such a strong trope that I recognise it in this first clip without even having watched much of the stuff.
Yeah.
So there's something in that sort of first scene. It feels like a very familiar TV setting of a in this case an American family in an American house.
Yeah,
they're around the breakfast table, and there's a bit of canned laughter. Someone makes a little joke, a bit of a pun of a joke, and we all know what that is straight away. But with this one, with the bit they did with at the start of this episode, it felt like there was a fakeness to it. And I think that was actually deliberate, because one of the big themes of this show for me is reality.
Yeah.
And the fact that what we think of as reality, what we think our lives are going to be, is very different to what they are. I.e., like what you're told as a child, like you're going to grow up and do this and have that, and this your life is all, you can almost have a description of your life before it even happens, and everything's going to be okay. And I don't think that's what life is. And I think this is one of the strongest themes for me in the show is that, and I actually think he does a really good job of showing that in the first episode. When you go back and look at it, and when you've seen the whole show, you sort of go back and you look at this episode very differently.
Okay. I just thought it was supposed to be a not very good scene from Horton Brown because Bojack still enjoys it.
Yes.
And I think that highlights his narcissistic nature, that this scene that's not very good or is awkward as
it feels like there's something fake about it.
Yeah. So it's like it's not a very good scene, but he's still enjoying it because it's him.
Yes.
And it's his past life.
Yes. He is a narcissist, I think, in this episode.
100%.
After the first scene, we see Bojack with a sit-down interview with Charlie Rose, this interviewer. And this is another really big bit for me. And I bet you didn't think we'd be talking about it this much.
I don't remember this.
Okay. So there's a couple of things that really stick out for me here. So this is where, so basically you have the first scene. Charlie Rose comes up and he basically explains the show. He goes, Horseman Story was a really popular show in the 90s and all this.
Okay, yeah. I
joined.
It was another scene setting thing.
Yes,
it was a total exposition.
Yes.
Like he's explaining it to the audience in the show, but then he's also explaining it to us.
Which is, it's nice. It obviously works quite well.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a couple of things in this interview which I think Charlie Rose basically introduces the show as a very broad show for a lot of people. He basically says, loads of people enjoyed the show, but critics said it was rubbish. Then we meet Bojack. One of the first things he says is that he's late and he's parked in a disabled bay.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I remember now.
This is where I think most people straight away think he's a dick.
Yeah.
I don't like him. Like he's doing everything that we don't want someone to do.
And the host of this show then calls him out on something, and Bojack's completely oblivious to what he actually means.
God, I don't know if you were thinking about the same bit of me actually. That I actually like.
Then when he says that he's parked in a disabled spot,
yes,
the host calls him out for parking in a disabled spot, but Bojack thinks that he's calling him out for using the wrong nomenclature.
Yes.
And he says like handicapped or something,
yes.
And he didn't know whether to call disabled people handicapped or disabled, but that's not the point that the host is making.
It's not.
The host is saying you're parked in a disabled spot and you're not disabled, and that highlighted Bojack's like oblivious nature.
Yes.
Again, his self-centered nature that he's only thinking about himself.
No, it definitely displays him as a total narcissist. But I think, and this is a really important point to me, is one, I didn't know what the word nomenclature was.
Nomenclature, yeah.
Until I got obviously in context you understand what it means. So actually, for me, there's intelligence there.
I would.
Well read.
I would push back on that.
Okay.
I think it showed that Bojack's stupid because he might know a big word.
Yeah.
But he didn't read the situation.
Right.
So I didn't see it as being intelligent. I saw it as being stupid.
Okay. So that's interesting. I saw it as intelligent. The other reason I thought it was intelligent was because I actually liked that Bojack said, "Oh, is that the right thing to say?" Like he is being, he's it's not the sort of the woke thing that he's saying.
Yeah.
I think he's actually, whereas most people would be like, "Oh my God, I didn't mean to offend anyone. I'm really sorry. I've got loads of disabled people as friends."
Yeah.
I think he actually makes a point of actually asking the question, what is the appropriate term for this category of people?
Yes.
And I think not enough people ask that term.
Okay. Knowing what I know about Bojack from the first few minutes of the show, I assumed it was because he didn't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
He didn't want to have a wrong spotlight shone on him, and he wanted to use the correct terms.
Yes.
Not to be courteous to the people that it's affecting, but more to save his own hide.
Yeah, and maybe that's a really interesting point. Maybe that's one of my points about maybe I skipped over this bit at the start. And now once I've gone through episodes and come back to it and looked at it again, I think actually it shows a different image of him. I think you see him in a different way.
Okay.
I think the first time you watch this first episode, he's a dick.
Yes.
And I think after you watch it more often, yes, he's obviously parked in a disabled bay and he's obviously been late, which most of us don't appreciate. So he's obviously not a very nice person to be around.
Yeah.
But I think there's an underlying intelligence that shines through now and again.
Okay.
And then after all that, we find out he's drunk as well.
Yep.
So he's turned up late, parked in the wrong spot, he's drunk.
Yeah.
So, he's obviously incredibly narcissistic.
Yep.
Or gives off the appearance and doesn't really care what people think, which might be quite nice, actually, I think, sometimes. Charlie asks him why the interviewer asked him why he thinks it was such a good show.
Okay.
Or he asked him, why do you think people enjoyed the show?
Okay.
Even though it was critically rubbish.
Yeah.
And another bit that I think shows his intellect here, or his well-readness, is he says it's not Ibsen. And this isn't something I picked up the first time, but as I've watched it over and over, I've wondered what he means by this.
Okay.
And Ibsen he's referring to Henrik Ibsen,
Okay.
who is a Norwegian playwright and theatre director who is deemed the father of realism. And basically, he was one of the first, it looks like from what I read, he was one of the first people that did plays that actually reflected the real lives of people.
Okay.
So apparently before this, it was very much about the gods and the ghosts and mythical stories, basically.
Yeah.
He brings up this person that I think 99% of people have never heard of, including myself.
Yeah, that just glossed over me for sure.
And again, this is something that I think you only see once you come back to it time and time again, and is actually, again, a reference to the theme of the show, or one of the themes of this episode in the show. He's saying horsing around wasn't Ibsen. It wasn't reality. It was a constructed, fake, fantasical story. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that Bojack struggles with. And I think actually a lot of us struggle with sitcoms and TV shows and us perceiving them as real life and stories of reality because they're set in reality. But I would argue most of the stories and themes potentially aren't what we actually experience in reality.
Okay.
Reality is a lot more boring.
But that's the same with any visual media. I don't know, because I've never worked for MI6, but I'm pretty sure most MI6 agents aren't running around the world as 00 agents, straightening their tie and sleeping with everyone they can get their hands on. I don't think this is exclusive to this medium. I think it's, unless you're talking about like a gritty drama, like it's always on a super reality level.
Okay, but do you think that we get sidetracked into sometimes thinking that it is reality?
Oh, for sure. I think that's
so. And that's the day.
I think that's why film and TV is as popular as it is.
Yes,
because it's escapism, right? It's like you watch a rom-com. You go, okay, well, that's how I'm going to meet my future wife or future husband, and we're going to have this amazing, quirky, romantic story about how we met in this exotic location, and I had all the right lines to say at the right times, and that's not how it works out.
And this is why, again, I'm saying about his deeper level of thinking. He's analysing the show himself and saying it's not reality.
Okay.
So, which I think what the audience of this show horsing around isn't doing that, and they think it's good.
Yeah, because most people, when they watch TV, they want it to escape. They don't want to pull it apart analytically and sit here for a while making a podcast about it.
No,
they just want to sit down and enjoy it.
And I think it would be quite boring to do a podcast about a really. I don't really like the word broad, but I'm going to use
No,
really broad TV show.
I agree.
It'd be difficult to put apart because it's not designed to.
I agree. You've got different. Like for me, I enjoy films a lot, and there are different certain types of films that I'll watch, given my mood.
Yes.
So, like, if I'm wanting something deep, then I'll put on 4-hour Martin Scorsese film that I really need to invest my time and my brain into. Whereas if I just want to decompress and switch off and have a good time, like Pacific Rim is brilliant. I think that's, for me, Pacific Rim is a perfect example of like a good, fun, stupid action film.
Yeah.
And like sometimes you need that. For a lot of people, though, that's their de facto form of entertainment.
And to be fair, I think that actually brings me on to the next point. What you're saying there is how Bojack defines the show, or the analogy he uses. And he says, basically, life is like one big kick in the urethra.
Yeah.
Or as he says, people have hard lives, and after a difficult day, they want to sit down and watch a show about likable people where whatever happens, at the end of 30 minutes, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, there isn't. There isn't. I'd like to say that there's actually a quote from one of the secondary characters that comes up in one of the later episodes, which goes back to this.
Okay.
So I won't address it now, but I think it's just also important to recognise that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting, this bit this is the bit where Charlie says, "Why do you think it was good?" And he said it's like one big kick in the urethra. And then he actually stops himself and says, because in real life, ... like we don't hear the end of the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was actually quite
poignant.
Yeah. It just felt very much like he was thinking about what he was actually saying, and he was saying to himself that, you know, my life hasn't been like a sitcom at all. Like that this is something that comes up a bit later, but everyone sees him as the character on the show. They don't see him as an individual. And yet I feel like he knows that's wrong, but he has to play his character all the time. But yeah, it just felt very good. And particularly because he actually ends that sentence by saying, "Did I say the thing about the kick in the urethra?"
Yeah.
Like, because he's drunk and his mind's all over the head. So there's a little bit of a gag there that I.
And he's already that's a preconceived joke or line that he specifically wanted to say, and
he's been testing it on people and working out clever things to say. Yeah. So I think that brings us to the end of the interview, where Charlie then asks him, "So what have you been doing since the 18 years this show has been cancelled?" And Bojack goes, and then it goes into our opening credits.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice, because I feel like I remember the first time I watched it, I didn't know if it was the opening credits or not.
Okay.
And it flowed really nicely, so I felt it was well done.
Okay.
There might be other people might have seen it straight away, but
it was clearly opening credits.
Okay, yeah. But it sort of, as opposed to talk about the opening credits, it does show him just passing through life.
Yeah.
I think it does a really good picture of what his life is like.
Yeah.
It's just his face, the camera's on his face, that a whole world is moving behind him. Yeah.
The world's passing around him.
It really makes you feel that, exactly that, like...
There's an apathy.
Yes. Yeah. And also quite like, I didn't know what you thought of I was going to ask you about the music, because I think you probably have more insight on the music than me.
It's quite melancholic.
Yeah. Quite dreamlike.
Yeah.
I didn't know what one of the... There's a bit of it sounds like something's been reversed or something.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. This is how conditioned my brain is now, that when the opening credits started, I initially skipped them.
Right, okay.
Even though this was season 1, episode 1, and I'd never actually seen the opening credits. And then I thought, no, wait, hang on. Because we're analysing, I should go back and actually watch them. So I rewound it and I watched it, and I wasn't.
Okay.
I wasn't. The opening credits are opening credits. I don't really put much stock.
I just thought it's a nice way, and they do change actually with the season.
I thought it was pretty obvious.
Okay.
I watching it, I didn't think there was anything to read into it. This is just, Bojack apathetically passing through life. I think it was very on the nose.
Okay. So we come out of the opening credits, and this is actually my favourite visual gag in the show.
Okay.
Because what we have basically is on TV, the turtle finds out that he's the father of a child on like the Jerry Springer type show.
Yeah.
And he pops his head into his shell.
Yeah.
It is there is a bit of humour there in just like, hiding away from the reality of the decision or the reality that he's going to face. But it also introduces the fact that in this world, we have animals as people.
Yeah.
Which is more, so it's a bit of the start, but this is the point where we really see that this is an anthropomorphic world. Anthropomorphic.
Yes.
One of the interesting things you picked up on this earlier, so we're going back to it. But one of the interesting things about that is that I think you have a device to give even more information about that character's character. So we now don't just have expression.
I will push back on what you're saying here by saying that this animal world, this anthropomorphic nature of the creatures in it, is more highlighted in episode 2 than episode 1.
Okay.
I think episode 1 establishes like these creatures exist, but I think in episode 2 the visual gags and the references are way more on the nose, way more like to the point.
I think it takes also a bit of time to get used to that concept.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you fall into it naturally in this episode as much as you do in other ones.
The only thing is when I first started watching it, I was like, is Bojack the only... Is he the anomaly? Is he just a horseman in a world with normal people?
Yeah.
But it turns out that there's loads of all different kinds of species.
Loads.
Yeah.
There is loads. And I think one of the reasons for that is actually, again, to highlight the reality theme that I was talking about. Where we have, so if we look at a sitcom, you have a realistic setting with an unreal story or unreal characters. In this show, the Bojack Horseman, we have unreal
characters in a more realistic setting.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
So I think one thing is it does quite nicely is the thing with all animation that the more like it has to stand out.
Yeah.
It has to stand out from everything else to get even a first glimpse of it.
On the subject of animation, I'm not blown away by the animation.
Okay.
I think compared to other ones that I've mentioned, like Rick and Morty and Archer particularly, I think Archer's visual style is so unique and just very, very smart. Sorry, I shouldn't say the animation. I don't mean the animation. I mean the art style.
Okay.
Because there's slightly different meanings.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't. The art style is very...
It doesn't make you think.
I don't know if it's intentionally basic.
Okay. I don't either. And like I think I kind of agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't think it does blow me away.
Although, having said that, there are moments, the way that the animal people are presented is sometimes very evocative, very... This will come up more in episode 2.
Yes.
But there's moments with the way that the animals are drawn and animated is funny in itself.
And this is what I was sort of saying, that it actually gives the writer, everybody, I suppose, another outlet to explore parts of the character, which I think is actually quite nice.
Yeah.
And this is where we meet Todd.
Yep.
Now, so Todd is a seemingly random kid that sleeps on Bojack's couch. So a bit like how you were saying you didn't like any of the characters.
No.
I felt like Todd was just a wacky kid that says a couple of jokes and does a couple of things, and I didn't see a lot of value in him.
The only value that I got from Todd was that Bojack, I can't remember what he says, but he mentioned something about the fact, something like, "Oh, why are you still here? Like, you're not my housemate, you're a squatter," or something along those lines. But then counter to that, like, why doesn't he just kick him out then?
Yes.
And in that whole short conversation between them, it told you a lot that this guy is squatted in his house, but Bojack kind of is okay with that. Like,
Yes.
he wants to keep him around for one reason or another, whether he's lonely or whether it's his only friend, or I don't know. But there's a bit of a play there where he says he doesn't want him there, but then at the same time he doesn't actually kick him out.
Yes.
So
and like I say, it feels a bit off.
Yeah.
Whatever it is at the moment.
Yeah, agreed.
There's also I think it's a nice visual gag here about Bojack's breakfast. And he goes to make breakfast and he puts some carrots, pills and vodka in the blender. And it obviously puts the carrots in because he's a horse.
Yeah.
What I think this is something I heard Shakespeare did very well. You have comedy on different levels.
Yeah.
And I think one level of the comedy of this show is very basic. You have a horse as a human, and so what's the horse going to have for breakfast? Carrots. So it adds a level of comedy, a small level of comedy that runs through the show that keeps you engaged, but it's never laugh out loud comedy. But I think it's enough to keep you interested while the story develops.
I think it's a counter to the dark nature of the show.
Absolutely.
I think if the story of Bojack Horseman was just a normal man, it would be pretty horrific.
Yeah. No,
I think the fact that he's a horse is just lightens it a lot.
That's a thought I've had quite a lot there. I don't think we've had a lot of dark comedy yet, or a lot of dark scenes yet, like we will. And the comedic relief is very important. Yeah. And it balances it very well.
Well, it's like you said, like this show is talking about the difference between realism and this fantasy world that we're portrayed with. And I think because this show does aim to tell a relatively realistic narrative, you need that absurd element.
Yes. Yeah.
That surreal element just to make it passable, but to make it watchable, basically.
Yeah. So this brings us on to Bojack meeting his publisher, Pinky Penguin.
Yeah.
Which again, obviously, there's a big reference to the Penguin publishing world there. Pinky tries very hard, but he just seems to be failing at everything. And he is that sort of old Gil character out of The Simpsons that you mentioned, which I actually really like because again, I think it's another reference to things aren't going to go the way you want them to. I think it's just another character that demonstrates that it's not going to be easy.
I thought my initial instinct is just a very disposable character.
Right. Okay. So you don't think he's going to be coming up?
I don't think he was a strong character.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he was just, like I said, he's just totally just a Gil character, just a bit down on his luck, moaning, whining, can't get a break.
Yeah.
A bit pathetic, really.
Okay. But I think there was a comedy in his patheticness.
No, it was too on. I think the whole thing was too on the nose. Okay. The fact that he's a penguin and he's working for a penguin pub, I didn't get it. I didn't like it.
We find out that Bojack's book is called the Bojack Horseman Story, written by Bojack Horseman. A beautiful sort of illustration of his narcissism.
Yep.
Which, again, I think it's really important that this episode does display how much of a narcissist he is for future episodes, not for spoiling anything. But he's also procrastinating a lot with his book, which I actually think this makes him a bit more relatable, because I think there's definitely, well, for me anyway.
I think Bojack is relatable. Everyone has some kind of narcissistic, self-righteous tendencies. You know, even if you're like the biggest saint in the world, like everyone has that. Everyone's the main character in the story of their life, right? So like everyone's always going to have that.
You are going to be the most important person.
Inward-looking narrative. So I don't think Bojack isn't relatable.
No, okay, yeah.
Or being relatable and being a nice person and not on...
Or liking the character.
Exactly, yeah.
They can be relatable. Maybe you don't like them because they're showing you the bit you don't like about yourself.
Yeah, some of the best characters are some of the worst people that you could hope to meet.
Yeah. So this is quite a poignant bit for me. Pinky says to him, "We're counting on your autobiography to save the company, no pressure." And Bojack says, "That's actually a lot of pressure." For me, this is a moment where Bojack is observing the reality of a situation. Pinky is, we're presuming he's head of the company or very high up anyway. And I feel the pressure is on him. He has the pressure.
Yeah.
And I think he's actually being inappropriate to put pressure on Bojack for that.
Okay.
And I think by trying to mask it with no pressure, like it's a threat.
Yeah.
It's a threat. And Bojack sort of calling him out on it, saying, actually, that is a lot of pressure. And it's really what he's saying is, that's not fair. That's your pressure. Why are you giving it to me? I think a lot of people would take on that pressure or part of that pressure. And that's a failing for most of us because we've got enough pressures to deal with most of the time. So for him to say, I'm going to push your pressure back to you, it's not fair you're giving it to me, I think is quite a clever observation about the world around him. I mean, the other way to look at this is he's just saying, I don't really care what happens with your company or what pressures you're under, and I'm a narcissist, so I'm just going to think about myself. So I think, but for me, him identifying what's actually being said and what's actually happening is quite astute.
I think you're reading too much into it.
Okay, you can say that. Yeah.
Legit. I think he's just stating the obvious. No, if someone said to me, we need you to write this memoir to save the company, no pressure, I would be like, no pressure. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's loads of pressure.
Yeah.
And I would say that. I don't think there's anything special about this scene.
Okay.
I think it's stating the obvious.
Okay.
I think the whole scene is just to build on Bojack's narcissistic elements.
Okay.
The title of the book, the fact that the book's about him, and the fact that this company, the Penguin Publishing, are basically staking the whole company on his memoirs, feeds into his narcissism because it means that he is a big deal.
Okay.
And it also says to the audience, like, that Bojack was once a big deal because if the sales of this book can save the company, then, it must be a big seller. So
yes, I suppose what the main thing I wanted to get here is Bojack looks at the world for what it is, as opposed to what we say it is.
Okay.
So this is also where Pinky says we're going to, we think you should have a ghostwriter.
Yep.
So we get that first point that there's going to be another character potentially coming in, but Bojack doesn't want a ghostwriter, and Pinky gives him one more week, which goes by very quickly, and he hasn't done anything.
Yep.
While he gets the call from Pinky, he's rewatching the episodes of this old show.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've seen a couple of episodes of Bojack Horseman now, so I think it's fair to say you've already probably seen that this is a reoccurring theme.
Yeah.
That he is reliving his past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, there's just a little joke that I quite like where Todd says, "Are you drunk?" And he's like, "Todd, I'm a 1,200-pound horse." It takes a lot to get me drunk.
And there's beer bottles.
He's really drunk.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm drunk.
Yeah.
So it's quite a nice little bait and switch sort of joke, actually, which, again, I think pulls you through the show while displaying his dependency on alcohol and dependency on drugs. So this is the point now where we meet Princess Caroline. Yes, so we get introduced to her as Bojack's girlfriend, who's in the middle of breaking up with him.
Yep.
Like they've gone to dinner and she's gone there to break up with him. There's a scene here again where she says, "I think we should see other people," and he goes, "What? We weren't seeing other people?"
Yeah.
Which again is like just this weird world that he lives in. And we go to this scene where he's having sex with another person.
Yeah.
while watching him on TV.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where he sort of just moves about the way.
Yeah.
And then as he delivers the punchline to a joke, his way ejaculates. Mm-hmm. And it just felt like, I don't know how much more of a narcissist you can be.
Oh, yeah, I didn't like it. It was cringe.
Did you?
Yeah, straight up cringe. Yeah. It was so, it was
because of the sexual nature, or?
No, because it was just so on the nose. Like you've just said, I don't know how much of a better display of someone being narcissist it could be. It was so just in your face. It's like, I'm getting sexual. It's literally a scene where he's getting sexual gratification from watching his own performance.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it's that you previously we've spoken about the realism in this show.
Yes.
And about how it's quite grounded. And it's moments like that that's like, no, that even I might be wrong, but even the biggest narcissist in the world wouldn't get that kind of
and maybe that's
enjoyment. I didn't like it. It was too on the nose.
Maybe that's a bit of an example of, like, I'm trying to say that the characters are real and the stories are real, but maybe that's sort of like a bit of a false exaggeration of a character, which again plays into not. So maybe that, maybe it's okay. You might have changed my mind on that bit. Actually, I quite liked that bit. Bojack also says to her, "Are you embarrassed to be with me because I'm a has-been?"
Okay.
To Princess Caroline.
Yeah.
I think now we're starting to. Well, I'm starting to see a bit more of him that he thinks he's a has-been. I think that's probably not many of us will be in that situation, but I think that's probably quite a difficult place to be.
It's come up a lot recently for me because I like sport, right?
Yeah.
And this is a very common thing for retired footballers. Yeah. That, especially now in the world that we live in, when they're like, they're earning multiple tens or even £100,000 a week, and then they go out every week at the weekend, and you've got tens of thousands of people like singing your name, and you've got endorsements, you're on commercials, adverts and stuff, and then that's taken away from you. Like, I don't know, it's a life of extreme privilege, so we don't want to feel sorry for these people, but at the end of the day, when it comes to mental health, everyone is fighting their own battle.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, everyone's the main character in their own story, and everyone sees life through their own eyes. So, like, if you are having troubles transitioning from a life previously of absolute success, it can be difficult to know what's on the other side of that, and then have an easy transition into something else. And I think the theme of Bojack Horseman is a case of, I don't know, but I'm assuming it's the case for a lot of Hollywood stars that find themselves surplus to requirements, and they're like, well, I was a star. Like, what do I do now?
Charlie Sheen is here. He's 2.5.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the sort, when we were talking earlier about TV shows. He is Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, definitely. We started talking about Princess.
Yes, Princess Caroline.
She is a character. She is one of the main supporting characters.
What was your first impression of?
So my opinion of what is it, Princess Caroline?
Yes.
My opinion of her rapidly shifted along with her the way that her character is presented.
Okay.
So when she's first presented as his girlfriend, and you immediately feel sorry for her because this scene in the restaurant is quite cringy, and Bojack is, well, he's a dick, really.
Yes, do you know? Yes, I think let's talk about that scene, because he clearly isn't interested in what she's saying.
No,
he's basically he's in his own world, and she's trying to be open and honest with him. She's talking about, what does she says, you don't respect me enough to have a baby with me. And it is a bit of a car crash.
That had that other flashback.
Yes.
I hated that as well. It was so on the nose. Like, they mention this kid, and he literally runs away. Yeah. He pushes the pram over, runs away, and has an accident. Again, going back to the other flashback that we talked about, this, you talk about the realistic nature of the show.
Yeah.
Like, again, that just totally took me out of it. It was so over the top.
Yeah.
So over the top.
There's one point to that flashback, though, at the end, where after all that catastrophe has happened, someone says to Bojack, "Aren't you the horse from horsing around?" That's something that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
So this idea, and it's actually literally that phrase that will get repeated so many times on this show. If we pretend that situation was real, and you've just been through this massive car crash and terrible incident that's happened, and the first person that comes up to you doesn't say, "How are you doing?"
Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Can I get help?
Yeah.
All the time they go, "Are you that horse from horsing around?"
Yeah.
So again, he's like, that's what he has to deal with.
Yeah, I understand that, but
I feel like
it's the whole flashback is that we've already discussed a number of like subtle jokes and subtle writing that goes on in BoJack Horseman, and sometimes it is clever writing, but then it seems to be all the flashback scenes are just so Family Guy-esque, just boom in your face kind of. All the subtlety's just gone out the window in the way that the scene is presented.
Yeah. So one of my problems, I'll bring it up now. One of my problems with this episode is it jumps around so much to try and tell you bits about this character, and instead of just writing it in an order, like when I rewatched it this time, I couldn't remember what the actual time was in the scene. So this is obviously the past now. This is like 5 or 7 minutes in the past, and within that there's another flashback. So it really it's my biggest criticism of this episode is it's really hard to follow.
This is the restaurant scene where he eats all the bread, and then he had to pay $10 for bread. So my first favourite visual gag is the family of Pidgeon. And when Bojack shouts out $10 for bread, and immediately they all fly off. Like, I thought that was my first. That was my first proper anthropomorphic
funny laugh,
funny joke. Where because it's pigeons waiting for bread, and when you find out it's $10, they don't say anything. They immediately just fly away like pigeons do. But it's the fact that they were dressed like humans and they were stood outside this restaurant waiting to go in. Like, I thought that I did enjoy that silly little joke.
I'm glad you liked that.
Going back to Princess Caroline. So initially she's presented as his girlfriend, and then soon to be ex-girlfriend, and he even tells her that he's going to drop her off, but he's not going to stop in her neighborhood, and she's going to have to like duck and roll when she gets out of the car, which he literally follows through on. I think he kind of just pushes her out of the car, doesn't he? So this whole scene, this awful scene in the restaurant, and then him literally pushing her out of the car, and like she dumps him, and it's over. And I'm like, okay, well, that was a short-lived character. And you feel sorry for her because she's on the receiving end of Bojack's narcissism, and like you wouldn't want to be. You would feel for anyone in a long-term relationship with someone like that. Obviously, clearly quite toxic. Toxic environment to be in. But then immediately she calls him with like an amicable kind of like voice. And he's quite surprised, but then that's the point when we learn that she's also his agent. And there was this conflict in me where I respect her for being able to like have that boundary of like saying at this moment I'm your girlfriend and at this moment I'm your agent. But then also, I've never met a Hollywood agent, but there's the trope. My favorite sitcom growing up was Frasier. Frasier's agent, BB Glazer, in that. He is one of the most awful characters, but brilliant characters in any show that I've seen. And it instantly took me back to that, of like this trope of like Hollywood agents being like kind of cutthroat and just like super efficient, and all they want to do is just like make money and like squeeze their clients and whatever. And I immediately went from sympathizing with Princess Caroline to oh, here's another dickhead in a cast of dickheads.
Right. This is also the place where, while they're in the middle of the breakup, we get introduced to Mr. Peanut Butter.
Okay, yep.
And
Another dickhead.
another dickhead. For a very different reason.
And clearly stupid as well.
And, okay. Yeah. I don't know if I'd go as far to say stupid, but...
I would.
Okay.
Because there's even... while we're on the subject of Mr. Peanut Butter,
Yes.
Towards the end of the episode, there's my favourite line in the episode when Bojack's talking to his ghostwriter, I think, outside on the balcony.
Okay.
And Mr. Peanut Butter's inside at the party. They skirt around the issue of depression.
Yes.
And Bojack looks at Mr. Peanut Butter and says something like, he's so stupid, he doesn't realise how miserable he should be.
Thank you.
And like that was my favourite line in the whole thing, and like that really resonated with me because there's been a lot of science come out in recent years showing that there is a link between intelligence and depression.
Right.
By far the best line in the whole episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. And maybe I'll... Yeah, well, we will definitely come back to that line because there's the whole thing at the end of the episode that we definitely need to talk about.
So that's highlighting Mr. Peanut Butter is stupid. And that's the impression. He just seems like the party dude.
I think Mr. Peanut Butter at this stage is the anti-Bojack.
Yes.
And he's happy. He's fun.
Yeah.
I think...
Younger.
I think the Labrador, we didn't talk about Princess Caroline being a cat, but the golden retriever, isn't he?
Yeah.
Basically,
yeah.
is a very well fitted animal representation for his character.
Yes, and my favourite visual gag from episode 2 involves Mr. Peanut Butter.
Yeah, so he's very much anti-Bojack. Although, I'm going to question his intelligence. You're saying he's stupid because there's a point where he makes a joke.
He might not be stupid.
No,
he's portrayed as being
yes,
stupid, I think.
Yes.
I don't know if we're seeing it through Bojack's interpretation of it, but...
Yeah. I think there's a joke, quite a clever joke that he makes where when he goes... there's a reoccurring thing that he says that Mr. Peanut Butter and Bojack Horseman in the same room... What is this? A crossover?
He says it every time, yeah.
He does say it a lot.
Yeah.
And Bojack, what does Bojack say? He goes something like, that doesn't get funnier every time you say it.
Yeah.
And there's a point where Mr. Peanut Butter goes, I think you're wrong, actually. Like, he acknowledges, it's almost like, at first, I think it's very easy to see Mr. Peanut Butter saying this phrase because it's like a catchphrase.
Yeah.
It's like... Yeah, and then it's funny because it's a catchphrase.
Yeah.
But I think Mr. Peanut Butter is actually, because of that sort of quick little sentence he says at the end.
Yeah,
I think he's saying it as a catchphrase, as an anti-catchphrase, as like to repeat to be obvious about it.
Okay.
So he's basically taken it to an absolute level.
I don't think that's...
Every time he meets him, he is deliberately saying it because he's saying, like, it's almost like ironic that he would say it every time.
I'm not sure I agree with the exact wording of describing Mr. Peanut Butter as the anti-Bojack.
Okay.
I think that Mr. Peanut Butter is there as a representative of what Bojack used to be.
Okay.
He's a previous version of Bojack. And then maybe in Mr. Peanut Butter, we could see what Bojack might have been like 18 years ago.
Right. Okay.
I think Mr. Peanut Butter is a throwback, and I think that's why we, as an audience, I don't know if it's the way that it's written like this, but we are kind of conditioned to not like him because Bojack is the protagonist, and Bojack doesn't like him because of what he represents.
Yeah.
Because of the theme of Bojack living in the past and wanting to reclaim past glories, that Mr. Peanut represents what he used to be.
Yeah. The other reason I think it's difficult to like Mr. Peanut Butter straight away is how he interrupts the meal. So Bojack says, like, we're in the middle of breaking up. And Mr. Peanut Butter goes, oh, so this would be awkward now if I just sat down and joined you. And he continued, like, I don't know many people who, if they thought the situation was awkward, would just be happy and want to sit down.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, how are you doing, Miss Princess?"
Yeah.
I'm doing okay.
Yeah. Either he's oblivious to the situation,
or
is deliberately being a dickhead.
Which both, I think, are not admirable.
No.
So yeah, I think although it's weird that he's a nice person, but we don't like him.
Yeah.
There is a little, I think this is one of the first jokes about, well, you talked about the agent being a trope. I think there's another trope joke here of, at the end of his conversation, he goes, "Erica," like to someone over there.
Yeah.
Like, oh, someone else has got my attention now.
Yeah.
Sort of, I wasn't actually having a deep conversation with you because I'm looking out for the next person I want to speak to.
It's the Hollywood networking opportunity, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's something that will come up. And I think there's also in this show, there's a lot of...
it's set in LA, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a lot of entertainment humour about how awful the industry is or how cliche it is.
Yeah.
So at this point, we come back to him in the room with Todd.
Yes.
So after all that we've just talked about with all these characters, we're now back in the present time. And that started at 6:41 and it's now 10:28. So that's a big, it's a 4-minute flashback.
Yeah.
His version of events is very different to, I think, the events that we saw.
Yeah.
He says about the real story was that I'm fat. So he's just gone through this breakup.
Okay.
And all that he's taken from it is that he's eaten loads of bread and now he feels fat. Which again is like, I think it's just this, even through what most of us would deem quite probably a traumatic time, he's still only displaying thoughts about himself.
Do you think that he's not accurately recalling the situation intentionally, or because he's so narcissistic that he's naturally putting a lighter spin on it?
I think he has had multiple thoughts and multiple things that have happened, but whereas he doesn't deem that event to be as important, a breakup to be as important as I'm really fat.
Yeah. Okay. I can tell you the next bit that really stood out for me.
Okay.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but this is when they started discussing throwing a party.
Yes.
Yeah. This was the first moment in the... I like it in writing when my expectations are subverted.
Right.
And the conversation that he has with Todd about throwing a party...
Yes.
Completely just... I was not expecting it at all. I thought it was brilliant. That Todd seems really keen to throw a party. And Bojack's like... He says something like, "Oh, why are you so keen to throw a party?"
Yes.
And then we get a flashback to Todd with some kind of maybe Mexican drug cartel or something.
Yeah.
And like he's in the warehouse and it's like a scene, it looks like a scene from Breaking Bad or like a gangster's film or something. Yeah. And there's something that's happened where this like cartel guy or this mafia guy, his daughter can't have her special party, her 16th birthday party or something like that. Yes. And was it Todd's fault that it couldn't happen or something, or he had something to do with
wrapped
it?
Up. I think he was. I think they say this is what you get when you're selling on our turf.
Okay.
So I think he's wrapped up in this anyway.
And his way out of it is by promising them that he will give her a party, and then we see this cutscene and this flashback, and then it cuts back to present day, and Todd says something like, "Oh, I just really like parties."
Parties are fun.
Yeah. So I love that, like, subverting expectations, that we're just expecting Todd. We see Todd, the way that we've introduced Todd is like, he just seem like a guy that likes parties. He's like a chilled, like, relaxed, kind of like, carefree, kind of bit of party guy. And then to see that the reason that he wants to throw a party is something that we totally did not expect.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
Okay.
But again, it was another moment of surrealism.
No, that was what I was going to say.
But I enjoyed that.
Yes.
So like,
I think it works because of his character. Because he's because he's the character
I don't know.
He's just on the couch.
Do you know
a bit goofy?
Do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of a Family Guy skit.
Yeah.
Totally a Family Guy skit where you have this current day conversation, and then there's a cutaway, a flashback to a previous, completely non-related event that is just nonsensical comedy. And coming from someone who grew up watching Family Guy, I wouldn't say I'm a massive Family Guy fan, but I did used to watch it a lot in the past, and I do think it's funny. I do like some episodes. The humour completely changed.
Yes.
It was a different type of humour in that, I think, in that one bit of writing compared to the whole rest of the Bojack episode up to that point.
I think this is something we see a lot more from Todd going forward. He tends to have... He has wacky experiences.
Yes.
I'll be honest, I struggle with it in the show generally.
Okay.
I feel like it's a side plot. Not always, but a lot of the time I feel like it's a side plot that keeps it light and interesting while it's dealing with the huge darkness.
I enjoyed it.
No,
and even going forwards when they're at the party and this cartel guy turns up, and it turns out like he's just a big sweetie, and he's just like really grateful for this party, and like his daughter's having a nice time, and Bojack's like, who are all these people in my house? And it's just a bunch of like Hispanic teenagers. Yeah, like it made no sense at all, but I enjoyed it. It was light-hearted. We're watching a cartoon.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was the first time in the episode when I felt like I was watching a cartoon.
It does add a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it's this interesting. Maybe it's interesting to have a character like Todd where you can explore stuff like that, whereas you're not exploring it with all the rest of the characters. Yeah. One of my favourite jokes, actually, Princess Caroline's calling Bojack, and she says, she's asking him about the book. She's saying, why haven't you written this book yet? You still haven't written it. We're going to get the ghostwriter and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. And
she says something like, it's like that time I caught you masturbating to pictures of yourself.
Yeah.
And he says, I wasn't masturbating to myself. I was masturbating to what the picture represented. It's completely different.
Yeah.
And I just, again, I think it's obviously funny because not like, why does he feel like he's got to make that distinction? Like, but obviously that distinction's a really big deal for him. Like, it's not because he finds himself attractive. He idolizes himself and his past, and to him, that's actually okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, but you weren't happy.
No, 200.
Yeah, okay.
Again, like literally getting sexual gratification from your own successes is, and it's like, okay, we know he lives in the past. Like, he's trying to relive his previous glory all the time, and like, we know. Okay, we don't need to have it rammed down our throats every 2 minutes.
Right then, so we find out that we get introduced to Diane through Pinky. So this is going to be a ghostwriter.
Yep.
After the scene with Pinky again, we go back into the living room, and Bojack has an anxiety attack.
Yes.
Or what we don't know it is at the start. It might be a heart attack. Something's wrong.
Yeah. He's
on the floor and he's asking Todd to put a false date on his tombstone.
Yeah.
As he's dying.
He says, make sure my tombstone says born 1970. And before he has time to finish the sentence, Todd's like, no one's going to believe that.
Yeah.
Just calls him out.
There's something quite humorous about that being a last time wish. Also someone saying, no one's going to believe that. Like, don't ask me to do that.
Yeah. His last dying wish is to lie about it.
Yeah.
That just sums up this character.
Not to say, live life to the fullest.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. It's all about other people's opinion of him.
Tell them I was sorry for that, or tell them I wish I knew that. So then we cut to a flatlining heart monitor. It's obviously because we're cutting to the hospital scene.
I got this straight away.
Yeah, this was on the notes, but it was also, again, it reinforces that he's watching the episodes over and over and over.
Yeah,
and he literally, Todd's like, "Why are you taking those episodes? Like, have you got those episodes with you?" So it's quite.
I don't know if there was also I don't know, this is total speculation, but some kind of like self-deprecating humor on behalf of the writer. I don't know. But when Bojack's talking about that episode, and he comments on it being like unrealistic or unbelievable.
We might have gone a bit too dark on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you're right.
I don't know if there's some kind of like self-deprecating point there.
Yeah, I mean, at the basic level, I think he's in this horsing around show. He died at the end of one season, but then he's come back season, which again is very sitcom, like something. Days of Our Lives is the American one, is the American soap opera, where people do miraculous things for no reason.
Yeah,
but you're right. I just think it's a nice joke. Yeah. As well. I just think it's like he looks back and goes, well, God, we went a bit dark with that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes, like I say, Todd says, do you just take those DVDs around with you everywhere? And Bojack says, Linus carried around a blanket and no one gave him shit for it. Yeah. And I didn't know who Linus was, but Linus was in Charlie Brown, in Peanuts.
Okay, right. Is the one with the blanket? Yeah, okay.
So, but again, even now, like, Bojack's acknowledging that he's taking these DVDs around with him as a comforter. So I think this is a bit of his self-awareness that he knows that that was his greatest bit, the greatest moment of his life so far. So why isn't he allowed to take it around everywhere? Yeah. And this is something that makes him feel comfortable and puts him at ease. Why are we questioning it? Yeah. But equally, if you hold on to anything for that long, it's probably not a healthy obsession.
Yes. Yeah.
Princess Caroline gets a phone call from another client, and Bojack's like, "You've got other clients?" Which I think is a bit of a Hollywood joke about actors thinking they're the centre of the world, and how could you possibly have...
I saw it as a callback to his earlier statement when he said, "We're seeing other people."
Yeah, that as well, yeah.
He says it in the same tone.
Yeah. Well, I've written it, it's actually setting up the next joke when the doctor says...
you remember the patient.
Again, so like he lives in this world where everybody literally serves him. Yeah. Everyone's only purpose is to look after him, which is narcissistic, but it's just a nice joke when he says it to the doctor. Yeah. Yeah, so the doctor says you had a mild anxiety attack, which, to be fair, when I was first looking at this, I was like, he's overreacted. Okay. But I think probably for some people who, if you've not had an anxiety attack before and you're not sure what's going on, maybe it was quite scary for him and he would need to go to hospital. Yeah. But the fact that they're saying it's mild is, I think, trying to say that you're fine, mate. Yeah.
Because Bojack says something like, mild. If that was mild, then I don't want to
try spicy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And then what I like then is he goes, "What, too smart for the room?"
Yeah, making a salsa joke. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like it was sort of like...
Was he kind of breaking the fourth wall there, do you think?
A little bit.
I felt it was.
Yeah, I don't know whether he's just enjoying the attention he's getting from everybody. Okay. So I think as he gets attention from people, he becomes a bit more likable and a character that makes jokes. Is this the first joke classic joke that he's made? I feel like he's been involved in jokes.
Yeah, possibly.
Where we've joked about a situation, or he's been satirical or something. Yeah. But this is the first joke that he's made. Okay. And I feel like maybe you're more willing to make jokes if you're in a comfortable, happy place, as opposed to... So I think he's enjoying the people around him.
Attention.
Yeah. But then he has another mild anxiety attack because he's got to call somebody. Yeah. I mean, in a serious note, he's suffering from a lot of anxiety of the next steps in his life because all he has to do is call this ghostwriter, and he can't deal with that pressure. Yeah. And if it's causing, if a phone call is causing you to have anxiety attacks, I think you're in pretty serious pretty dangerous place. Yeah. So we're getting towards the end of the episode now, and we're at the party that Todd has set up. That Bojack has said that he doesn't want to have, but sort of Todd has gone to say it and do it anyway.
I'm going to butcher this, so I apologise to any Spanish speakers, but it's a quinceanera?
Quinceanera.
A quinceanera? Quinceanera?
I don't know. But yeah.
I know, but yeah, it's when a Spanish girl has a 15th birthday party.
I feel like it might be a bit of a coming of age thing.
Yeah,
like
it is, yeah.
But yeah, so they're throwing this party, and there's a nice visual gag that I like where they're playing pin the tail in the donkey, but there's actually a donkey standing next.
Yeah, and they're chasing the trying to put the pin the tail on the actual donkey.
There's a little couple of nice jokes there.
Yeah.
I didn't mention earlier about how Bojack said that he doesn't want a cotton candy machine.
Yeah.
And he had at the last party they had, he was sick.
Yeah.
Because he had too much cotton candy.
Yeah. There was even a flashback scene. Yeah. Another cheap Family Guy
so
flashback scene.
It is in its place. It happened at 10 minutes 50, I've written here, where's a flashback to him being sick with a cotton candy machine. And then we see there's another, even though he said, I don't want a cotton candy machine, there's a cotton candy machine there. So I think we sort of know.
And he's not mad about it.
No. Well, it's sort of like, oh, don't put that cake there.
Yeah.
So I think there's something here about Todd saying, at first Todd seems to accuse Bojack of being racist, basically, by saying, he says this is a quinceanera.
Yeah.
And Todd's like, oh, what? So any party with Mexican 15-year-old girls is a quinceanera. This teamed up with the bit where they've got the piñata, I think is actually saying something about some people will get accused of a racist comment for an observation about something that is happening, which is quite common. It's very easy to do. But why this is really important is because later Bojack sees the piñata being hit.
Yeah.
Because Todd's like, oh, you're offensive. He doesn't say racist. He's like, it's offensive to say that. And then Bojack's basically saying, you need to assess what you think offensive is.
Yeah.
Like me assuming that a group of people are having a party that is part of that culture is probably stereotypical because it actually might not be.
Yeah.
But
it's not
it probably is.
Yeah.
But having a figurine beaten of you so that you can get candy. So what they're doing is the tradition of beating an animal to get a reward.
Yeah.
That is offensive.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really nice, it's another observation from Bojack.
Yeah.
I think that perspective is quite.
But this isn't this as a commentary on like perspective?
Yeah.
Of like people might white people might use a racial slur.
Yeah.
Without meaning to be offensive.
Mm.
So like some
context.
Yeah. So so let's generalize and say some older people in this country still use the word coloured for people of colour.
Yeah.
And they might not perceive that as being offensive because they're not black.
Yes.
Whereas black people do find it offensive because it's coming from their perspective.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a commentary on that? That hitting a piñata to us isn't offensive because we're not horses.
Yes.
And it's only in Bojack's frame of reference from his perspective, it is offensive because he's a horse.
Yeah. Mr. Peanut Butter comes back into the scene to the party.
Yep.
And he basically is engaging in small talk, but he's not actually really listening to what anybody's saying.
He's asking, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? When there's all like these random strangers in his house.
Yes.
And that's when Mr. Peanut Butter turns up. Yeah. And he goes, what are you doing here? Yeah. And Mr. Peanut Butter makes the same joke. Oh, Bojack and Peanut Butter are in the same... Yeah.
And it's the reoccurring joke. But again, I think he's actually doing it out of... Well, there's another reason why he's doing it, but he's actually doing it because it annoys Bojack a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's doing it, he's doing it like, because he knows it goes to him.
Yeah.
So Bojack finally meets Diane. And we have a nice little joke here where she has a difficult to pronounce surname.
Yeah.
And he can't say it right at the start when he reads it on the book in Pinky's office. And he says, she goes, "Oh, you're Bojack Horseman." And he goes, "Oh, sorry, I don't want to get your name wrong." And she's like, "It's Diane."
Yeah.
Like playing on the fact.
Yeah.
But she's being deliberately funny now, I think.
Yeah.
Diane.
It's quite an endearing opening as well.
Yes.
For Diane.
Yeah. Okay. I've straight away I've written she's a classic overthinker.
But she's also made a joke to start with about her name, which helps break the ice, and it's like diffuses the situation.
Yeah, it disarms.
I think she's the first character in the episode, in the show, where you have a good first impression.
Yeah,
by the end of the episode, I like Todd because he's obviously well-meaning and kind-hearted, and he's got that comedy relief. When you first meet him, he's introduced as like a layabout squatter.
Yes.
So your first impression of him is not great.
Yeah.
Diane is the first character in the episode where she has a good first impression.
She's also straight away, like you mentioned earlier, she's portrayed as being very opposite to Mr. Peanut Butter. We don't know that she's in a relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter. And Bojack's saying about how much he doesn't like Mr. Peanut Butter. Or it's not that he doesn't like him, that he annoys him, I think is what it is.
And then we find out in the conversation that they are together. And then my initial first impression of Diane being positive is then completely subverted. And I think, oh, here's another dickhead. Because they've been having this whole conversation about Mr. Peanut Butter.
Yes.
And she doesn't immediately tell him that they're together. Yes. Which is a bit underhanded. I don't know if she necessarily needs to, but for me it felt a bit off that he's... Was he directly bad-mouthing him? I think he kind of...
I think he's saying stuff that you wouldn't say to someone's partner.
Exactly, yeah. And she doesn't say anything until Mr. Peanut Butter turns up and announces that they are together. And then Bojack has this, like, kind of comedy string of questions of, like, you're seeing each other. Oh, you see each other naked. And, like...
Right,
like, he finds it hard to believe initially, and he asks a number of reinforcing questions to the point where he finally gets it and then throws up.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that and we'll go back to another point. This is the long joke for me, and this is what Bojack Horseman will do, the show will do very well going forward is, I mean, that joke about him being sick is set up halfway through the show, where they go, "Oh, don't get a cotton candy machine because I'm going to be sick." And to be fair, I don't think the first time I watched it, I was thinking he was going to be sick. But the sheer, like...
You didn't think he was going to be sick?
No, I didn't see it.
It was all over it for me, man. Like, when he set it up initially, saying, "Don't get a cotton candy machine because last time I threw up a lot." And then as soon as a cotton candy machine, I'm like, he's going to throw up at some point.
Yes.
I didn't like that ending.
No,
I didn't like that ending.
I suppose what I'll cling on to then is it was set up very early on.
Yes.
And I think this is something that is I think it's set up in this episode. It might not be it might be a bit obvious, but I think it sets up the idea that there's going to be long jokes. I think that idea of setting up a joke and having a long wait for...
Oh, yeah, I like that. I think
it's good. I think something we'll see more. So that's one of the concepts.
I just didn't think it was very funny.
No, okay.
It was nice. It was like, oh, yeah, you've tied the episode up nicely with a callback to a previous part of the episode. I didn't find it particularly funny.
Let's go back to your favourite line of the show, of this episode.
Yeah.
Look at him. He's so stupid. He doesn't realise how miserable he should be.
Yeah.
I envy that.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think that's something that it stuck out to me straight away. I think this is a concept that is going to get addressed a lot.
Yes.
This happiness, what makes you happy, or this is a introduction to that theme. So similar to the theme of reality, I think happiness and the pursuit of happiness is a strong theme.
This topic of conversation could branch off into so many different tangents, though.
And I think it does in the whole show.
Okay. I think this resonated with me because I
think we always see people that are happy.
Yeah.
And you think, why am I not happy?
Yeah.
But I think what makes it even exaggerated for Bojack is it's someone that's had a very similar career to Bojack, and he seems to be doing okay. So imagine seeing someone on the same level of you.
Yeah, but this is the old Bojack. Would Bojack 18 years ago be miserable, or would he be happy?
You'll have to keep watching. I'm not going to talk about that.
It's like at this point we don't know if Bojack is miserable because of his current existence, because of the loss of his previous fame and fortune, or whether he is inherently predisposed to being depressive.
If he's just a depressed person.
Yeah, because they're all different personality types, right? This topic of conversation always takes me back to The Matrix as well, when Cypher is talking to he's talking to one of the agents. He's talking to Agent Smith, and he takes him out for steak, and he's like, after all this time, the one thing I've learned is ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
And yeah, whenever this kind of topic of conversation comes up, like that takes me back to that.
Yes, because Diane explains to him the story of the dad from the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
Which the Brady Bunch is it's an old sitcom, and what I can gather, it was Bojack explains it a bit differently.
Yeah.
But essentially, what I read, it was two divorced parents that came to live together and bought their own families.
Yeah.
They had the dad and three boys, and the mum and three girls. They all came to live in one house, and it's an absurd situation. It was deemed. I think actually, when I was reading about it, it was deemed as quite radical.
Okay.
Like it was at that time, it was very controversial.
And he makes some kind of meta joke about one of the actors being gay or something.
So the story that Diane is telling Bojack is that the dad from the Brady Bunch wanted to be a serious actor.
Yeah.
And he felt that doing the Brady Bunch as a show was beneath him.
Yes.
And Bojack goes, that's not all what was beneath him.
Yeah.
Salty gay joke compared to that.
Yeah.
And
so I don't know.
No,
I'm assuming that implies that the actor that played the dad in the Brady Bunch was gay.
Yeah.
Which is I don't know if you describe it as meta or what, but like this is a fictional character.
Yeah.
Talking about a real TV show referencing the real actor that played this. There's levels that I went to get my head around. So he was married and had a kid. His name was Robert Reed.
Right.
And according to Wikipedia, it says that Reed kept the fact that he was actually gay a close secret, since public knowledge of his true sexual orientation during that era would likely have damaged his career.
Here's a question. Is it just an offensive joke that he makes? I mean, really, whether he's gay or not, it doesn't matter. So are we using it as the topic?
Yeah, I didn't understand the joke.
Yeah. But is that why he has to clarify afterwards, like, sorry, I'm better than that?
If the actor was known for sleeping around, if the actor was known for being very promiscuous, and that was what they were known in, and that was the big headline, then this joke of saying that's not all that was underneath him would trigger.
Yeah.
But just because I don't understand what the relationship is between him being gay and something being underneath him.
You can be heterosexual and something being underneath you.
Yeah, and you can be gay and like not be very promiscuous.
So you think it doesn't work?
I don't understand. I didn't understand what the joke. I didn't understand the joke.
Maybe it was to highlight Bojack's being nervous. He says earlier on when he's looking at the page rubber, "Oh, she's cute."
Okay.
Like he acknowledges that she's cute. I've written here about how I think that.
So you think it's intentionally a bad joke, like a badly written joke.
That's what I'm thinking now. He likes her, and I also think they've shown a connection. I think a couple of things that they said in their brief conversation have been quite deep.
Okay.
And I think you're more likely to be deep with someone that you've got an attraction to.
Okay.
Or you're willing to be open.
Yeah.
Basically.
You have a connection to.
Yeah, so if you're willing to be open, you're going to talk about deeper things.
Yeah.
And he also said he's found her attractive earlier on. So I would say he's made a bad joke. But then he apologises for it as well. So I think he's showing how nervous he is. But the point of Diane's story is that she says most people haven't done the Brady Bunch version of what it is for their lives.
Yeah.
So sort of saying about acknowledge what you have done rather than what you want, and be happy with what you've done rather than what you want to do.
Yeah. Which is a big topic for me.
Yeah.
Huge topic.
Yeah. I think more for a lot of people, it's like,
I think I said to you the other day, one of my favourite quotes from last year was from Alex Hormozy when he said, "You've already achieved goals you said would make you happy."
Yeah.
And
this is what Diane's saying.
Any kind of callback to that, I'm totally on board with.
So she's basically calling Bojack out on his depression and saying, "Why are you depressed?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be depressed."
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Because she goes, this is one of my other favourite lines from this show. She goes, "You're responsible for your own happiness."
Yeah.
And the project goes, "Good Lord, that's depressing."
Well, yeah, he says, "I can't even be responsible for my own breakfast."
Yeah. So, and that's it. One, it's just a nice, funny line.
Yeah, but and here's another cheap flashback of him pouring out cereal.
Yeah, I don't.
There was no need for it.
I don't like it.
There's just a line saying, "I'm responsible for my own happiness. Yeah. I can't even be responsible for my own breakfast."
Yeah,
that line on its own is okay.
It's got a lot, and it's got so much weight.
It's good. Yeah, and you don't need this protracted little skit where he's struggling to pour cereal out of the box. Again, 2 on the nose.
Yeah, it goes back to my thing about that. How many flashbacks have we had and cutscenes like that?
Yeah.
I've lost count.
Yeah.
There might be a bit in it where it's just a visually funny thing on a lighter level.
Yeah.
That it has to break up this conversation.
The flashback either needs to be not there or more absurd.
Okay.
Like the Todd one.
Yeah.
If he'd have said, "I can't even be responsible for my own breakfast," and he's like chasing a turkey around his apartment or something.
Yeah.
Like just something completely absurd. I think that would have hit better than...
That is more the Family Guy route of comedy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this goes back to the subverting expectations with Todd, as I got earlier. That was the one flashback that I actually liked because it...
Yeah, I think I would have left that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he's also making a bit of a point about how big a responsibility that is and how we don't take it seriously enough.
Well, being responsible for your own happiness.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Like, good Lord, that's depressing. Like, I feel like he's almost saying, like, that is a huge undertaking.
That not enough people acknowledge.
Yeah, and it's going to be a real... Like, I'm already in a low place, and now you're saying that I'm in this low place because of me. Yeah. If I'm not happy and you're saying it's my responsibility, that's a lot. That's a
my
big
fault.
Blame circle where you get lower and lower and lower.
Yeah.
So I think actually this is what's difficult with these conversations, because I don't know. There's a big question there for me.
Okay.
About if you're responsible, it's saying what you're saying is my fault that I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Because that. Maybe it's a development thing where at first that seems like a negative thing, but as you work through a process, you find out that that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a mindset change.
We have a realization.
Yeah.
You're responsible for your own happiness.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's the life. You are on the whole responsible for the life choices that you make.
Yeah. I think I'm pushing happiness and unhappiness and depression too closely together for this quote.
Yeah.
So Diane convinced. So we're getting towards the end now. Diane convinces him that it is going to be a good idea to work together. And Bojack, it sort of just makes me laugh a bit that he's like, don't put all that stuff about me being sad in the book.
Yeah.
Like, and then the girl walks past that he's checking out and he's like, starting now.
Yeah.
Starting now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that is very, right, no, it needs to be a good.
He wants to control
everything
that is perceived about him.
Then we find out at the end of the episode that they're in a relationship, Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane. And yeah, I think part of his being sick convulsion is also his. Yeah, I mean, he goes through this big monologue, like you said, about what you see him. They can't get his head around that they're together. Yeah. Maybe we can't either as an audience because
no, I wasn't expecting it.
No,
it was a curveball. Yeah. I didn't see that coming at all.
I think particularly because I think we do see them get quite close. Mm-hmm. Like there's been a connection and now there's a third wheel.
Okay.
And maybe that's a bit sitcom-esque, but this shows where the progression is going to be in the series.
Okay. Will they? It will. It's the will they? Will they? Yeah.
Which is really cliche, but it obviously works really well.
Hey, the Daphne and Niles storyline carried through Frasier for like
I thought you were gonna
10 seasons. So
I thought you were going to say Ross and Rachel. That's the one that.
Yeah, but Friends isn't very funny.
Yeah,
I grew up watching.
But I
grew up watching Friends.
Yeah,
I did enjoy it at the time, but like I don't think it's aged well.
That has taken us a while, hasn't it? But we've got to the end of the episode. Do you think you could just sum up what you thought of the episode in a couple of sentences?
Yeah. I wouldn't watch anymore.
You wouldn't watch anymore.
No, that's exactly the same as what same as my feeling was 10 years ago when I watched it when it first came out. Based on the season 1, episode 1, I think some of the writing is pretty good, but it's just full of unlikable characters. I think the flashback scenes are very on the nose. I think the main theme of Bojack living in the past and being narcissistic, and the theme of Bojack is just rammed down your throat at every opportunity of him being self-centered and narcissistic. It just seems like some of the things we've discussed today has made me reassess it, looking at it differently, some of the things that you've said. But after watching it and coming out of it, it's just a one-dimensional character. Yeah,
I think for me, this is a very difficult first episode for a show. Yeah. I think probably, being honest, I think the real reason I probably continued is because of Netflix and binge watching. Most of the time, if I've got a 20-minute episode shows, realistically, I'm probably guaranteed, as long as it's not awful, I'm going to watch the first 3 episodes. Yeah. And I think the next episode for me is a lot better.
Yeah.
But by itself, this episode is difficult. And I think it's mainly difficult because they've tried to show us all of the secondary characters.
Yeah, it's just
the timeline was.
Yeah, but you can set the scene and have a good story at the same time.
Okay, well they didn't. He picked. Okay, well he didn't do
so. If I compare it to the shows that I mentioned at the start, Archer and Rick and Morty, from the very first episode of watching Archer, I was like, what is this? This is like I've never seen a cartoon like this before. It like the art style, the characters, the action, the way that it transitions from scene to scene using language is just brilliant. How like one sentence ends and that starts the next sentence in the next scene. It's so clever. Yes. And then with Rick and Morty, watching that and seeing all these like being someone who's interested in like nerd culture and seeing all these like really smart like pop culture and nerd culture references in Rick and Morty, it just hooked me straight away.
The main positives I take away though from this episode is setting up some of the themes to go for.
Well, yeah, this is why we're here, because you're gonna tell me that it's going to get better, and that I'm going to learn to appreciate it like many, many, many other people have. So
and it's also very common for people not to like the early episodes.
Okay.
Favorite visual joke is the turtle's head popping down for me when he finds out he's the dad. I think it's a really important joke after those opening credits, because it cements the idea of this different world.
Yeah.
And the different world is very important, not just to make the episodes stand out when you're looking at them, but as this reality versus.
Yeah.
So it is really important to show you that. I feel like yours is the pigeons.
I like the pigeons because it didn't break the flow of the scene as well.
Yeah,
because it's mid Bojack's sentence, and it cuts to outside. The pigeons fly away, and then it's very short, and it cuts back in, and the scene continues. And it's literally just that bit when he says, "What, bread's $10" or something like that," and the pigeons fly away. And I liked it because it was just a quick, snappy kind of funny, cool little joke.
Let's do the rating for the episode then. What's your rating for this episode out of 10?
4.
4. Okay.
Yeah.
I died a little bit inside, but no, because this means, see, what I'm actually thinking is the change is going to be even more dramatic. If you feel it's so bad now. Yeah. But I've rated it a 7.
Okay.
I didn't mention IMDb rating. What do you think it got?
Probably a 7.9.
7.1.
Okay.
We'll keep a tally of the ratings.
Yeah.
And we'll do a season rating. Well, we won't do a season rating. We'll average them for the season, and that'll be their rating that you give it. And hopefully we'll see that increase.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. In the next episode, we'll be discussing Season 1, Episode 2, Bojack Hates the Troops.